European politicians choose their words carefully, particularly German ones, like the Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, who went on the state-funded broadcaster where he said, finally, and more than once, that Israel has gone too far.
Ich werde es jetzt auch noch etwas deutlicher sagen. Das, was die israelische Armee jetzt im Gazastreifen macht, lässt sich nicht mehr mit einem Kampf gegen den Terrorismus der Hamas begründen.
We have been hearing more and more international criticism. Germany's is probably the most significant one because of the historical baggage, that guilt of the Holocaust that brought Germany to just accept and support whatever
crime Israel has been committing. So the fact that even Germany can no longer whitewash Israel's crime is extremely significant.
The foreign minister said, but you know what, we will not ban the weapons to Israel, we reject an arms embargo.
Deutschland als ein Land, das ja das Existenzrecht und die Sicherheit des Staates Israel als Teil seiner Staatsräson versteht, immer verpflichtet, Israel auch.
So the European government is saying, we condemn a killing spree, but we will give the killer a sharper knife. Telling Israel, what you're doing is morally wrong and might lead to negative consequences, but we're not going to implement those consequences yet. With the European governments, you can see stronger statements at the moment, but statements basically bounce off Israel's Iron Dome of impunity.
From Merz, of all people, it is truly too little too late, and I await to see whether Palestinian solidarity activists, students who have been calling out this genocide and facing brutal policing, in some cases deportation. I look forward to Merz welcoming all those people back to Germany and telling them that they were right all along.
Chancellor Merz added Germany's name to a growing list of Western countries, including France, the UK, and Canada, that have criticized Israel over this war, threatened it with sanctions, but have not yet acted. That effectively buys the Israelis time, which they are using to keep punishing Palestinians, cloaking their war crimes under the cover of organizations like the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, the GHF. After consistently blocking aid from getting into Gaza and attacking the agencies trying to help Palestinians, including the UN's, the Israelis teamed up with American military contractors, mercenaries, to create the GHF, whose first foray into Gaza proved disastrous. Crowds of hungry Palestinians were herded like animals into an aid depot in Rafah, humiliating scenes worthy of a concentration camp. The crowd surged, overwhelming those contractors. Shots were fired. At least 3 Palestinians were killed. The government media office in Gaza called it a deliberate massacre, a full-fledged war crime committed against civilians suffering siege-induced starvation.
People in Gaza are literally starving, especially children, because their bodies are not able to withstand that level of malnutrition. Even some of Israel's staunchest allies are now coming out to criticize Israel for its starvation campaign.
Because this war has gone on for far too long. We cannot allow the people of Gaza to starve.
It's not because they're having these big epiphanies that mass slaughter of Palestinians is wrong.
There's a great liberal centrist tradition of standing on the right side of history only when the relevant moment to do so has significantly passed. We are seeing that grand liberal tradition be repeated now by Keir Starmer, Emmanuel Macron, Mark Carney, and other leaders who are only willing to condemn, but indeed not stop, Israel's activities at this point. I think future-proofing of reputation to say, oh, but we did indeed speak up, might very much be in play here. But those of us who have been paying any attention at all for the last year and a half plus are all too aware that these very governments have been funding and ideologically enabling Israel's actions.
Throughout its war on Gaza, Israeli officials from Benjamin Netanyahu on down have routinely dismissed allegations of war crimes as inherently anti-Semitic.
The anti-Semitic decision of the International Court in The Hague is a modern Dreyfus trial.
That argument is more difficult to make now, since more and more of those accusations are coming from Israelis, including a former prime minister.
What is it if not a war crime?
Ehud Olmert first made that argument in a liberal Israeli paper, Haaretz, before repeating it on CNN. Yair Golan, a former army chief of staff turned opposition leader, is another who has strayed from the path.
כששרים בממשלה הזו חוגגים מוות והרעבה של ילדים, חייבים לומר את זה.
There have also been shifts in coverage in the Israeli media. Although limited and more common in the print sector than the broadcast side, they are notable in that they reflect what is occurring politically.
Ehud Olmert is one of the earliest founders of Netanyahu's party Likud. So he is no left-wing pro-Palestinian peacenik. He's the guy that carried out one of Israel's most atrocious wars on Gaza, Operation Cast Lead. So to see him now condemning what Israel is doing in Gaza as a war of annihilation, as genocide, it is extraordinary. It speaks basically of how far Israel has gone.
This moment is ripe for the likes of Yair Golan and other opposition figures in Israel, because Netanyahu is facing increased pressure, and leaders around the world will be happy to scapegoat Netanyahu as the perpetrator of this genocide in Gaza, rather than face the reality that this was a genocide perpetrated against the Palestinian people by the state itself. And so this moment presents an opportunity to put all the blame on Netanyahu, both internally and internationally.
Israel is now panicking, realizing that their strategy of repeated atrocities to exhaust the global attention did not work. That's why you had Yedaot Ahranot saying, our propaganda is collapsing, our legitimacy is over. And you had Israel Hayom saying, the world is talking less about us and more about Gaza. And their solution is not to end the genocide, but to propagandize more, to whitewash the genocide even more, to double down on the failing strategy that didn't work.
Without a doubt, there are media outlets and journalists who are reassessing their position regarding this war. And Ynet is a good example. They're showing more pictures of what's going on in Gaza, speaking through the angle of starvation, referring to it more and more.
Overall, however, Israeli media coverage that allows for empathy for Palestinians remains the exception, not the rule.
אנחנו שולחים 5 אוגדות של חיילים מטובי בנינו להילחם בעזה, לשחרר את החטופים, להכריע את חמאס, ובמקביל לזה אנחנו נמשיך להכיל את האויב.
600 days into this war, there have never been more lives at risk in Gaza, where day after day, GHF aid depots have produced nightmarish scenes of desperation and violence. Politicians overseas out to salvage their legacies could be enough to save some of those lives. But, as Israeli journalists well know, there will be no saving of reputations on the Israeli airwaves. The moral standing of news channels that too many citizens there still use as their primary source of information.
If you're only consuming Israeli media in Hebrew, you will know less about what the Israeli army is doing in Gaza than probably any given citizen in the rest of the world. The Israeli media has been a collaborator with this genocidal mindset and actually promoting it. And by concealing the Holocaust of Gaza from the eyes of the Israeli public, when the day comes that the criminals responsible for this genocide will stand on trial, I think next to them on the bench, the Israeli media should be located.
There's a reason that experts in genocide studies and humanitarians are using terms like final solution for this stage of the genocide in Gaza. We're seeing images of children burnt, trapped in schools. The reports we're hearing from the imperiled hospitals has prompted certain world leaders to speak up, but that shouldn't lead any viewers to think that this is because there's been some sort of dramatic aberration by the Israeli military. This is a continuation and an escalation in Gaza after so many, many months of this kind of genocidal warfare.
Throughout Israel's war on Gaza, healthcare workers have become key voices in the reporting of this story. And over the past couple of weeks, the dispatches coming out of hospitals there have grown more and more desperate. Pinocchio has been tracking.
94% of all hospitals in the Strip have been damaged or destroyed. More than 1,400 healthcare workers have been killed, with thousands of doctors and nurses arrested. The few who have made it out of prison say their Israeli captors reserved specific brutal torture for medics. International doctors who have traveled in with aid groups now say their mission goes beyond medicine.
The main thing is to come here to bear witness, because you're not seeing what I'm seeing, because there's been a complete block to all media.